This is episode 297, How Acceptance Changed My Life, Peace, Resilience, and Self-Love. Learning how to be accepting was one of the most important things I learned in recovery. I had no fucking idea how unaccepting I was of myself, other people, the world, my circumstances. That's why the second episode of this podcast was about acceptance, because it was pivotal to my recovery. I put a link in the show notes to that episode so you can take a listen to it if you haven't already. Now that I have been practicing acceptance for almost 6 additional years since I recorded that, I want to share some of the long-term impacts of being accepting of people, places, and things. Now, there are still times when I don't accept things. They're pretty rare nowadays, and they're minor things. They're not the big, huge things like they used to be. I have so much more peace, serenity, and grace these days since I'm not constantly fighting against reality like I used to be. I give people the benefit of the doubt much more frequently than I ever did before. When I see people doing what I used to call asshole behavior, now I'm like, oh, they're probably an adult child and they don't know any better. Or they're terribly wounded. It's not that they're a broken person or they're evil or they're a piece of shit or something like that. And I didn't used to know any better when I used to do that kind of stuff. So they need blessings rather than curses. Because I've become so much more accepting, I don't spend a lot of energy pushing against or fighting against what's actually happening in my life. I've stopped wanting things to be different than they are. Okay, well, that's not exactly true. I may want them to be different, but I don't put a ton of energy and effort into pushing against the fact that things are the way they are. How acceptance impacts my relationships is that I really don't take things so personally anymore. I see that most frequently in my romantic relationship. I can see now that in all of my previous romantic relationships, I wasn't accepting of their behavior. In addition to resisting their behavior and trying to get them to change, my lack of acceptance also meant that I often made their behavior mean things about me. I now understand that it had absolutely nothing to do with me or our relationship. They were entirely about that person. I can see that so clearly now with my sweetheart because he is who he is. He was 60 when we started dating. His ways of being in the world and around the house are his ways of being. And they're about who he is and his patterns. Very little, if any, of it has anything to do with me. That understanding comes from me no longer trying to fight against him being the way he is, which is what I did with every man I ever dated. That makes for a lot more pleasant, peaceful, and healthy relationship than I've ever had before, because I'm not pushing against who he actually is. I'm not trying to use surreptitious ways of controlling and manipulating him to get him to do things my way. Being accepting of the people you're in relationships with is utterly profound. It's really hard to catalog all the effects of that. But imagine if you stopped pushing against and fighting against all of the people in your life being the way they are. Every family member, every friend, every colleague, every stranger on the street, every driver on the road. If you just accepted, this is what's happening, you'd expend so much less energy because you wouldn't be resisting what is. All that energy that you're no longer putting into resistance becomes available to you so you can steer it toward living your life the way you actually want, based on how the world is actually set up rather than on how you wish it was set up. Personally, I have a lot more time and energy to dream and plan for the future and enjoy the present moment than I did before because I'm not caught up in being pissed off about what's happening at the moment, or maybe even about the past. When I'm more accepting, I have stronger relationships because I build trust with people and I'm much more authentic with them. That leads them to feel trusting of me and feel more comfortable to be vulnerable and authentic with me. I have much better communication since I'm not constantly putting people on the defensive because I'm no longer trying to manipulate and control them into being a more acceptable version of themselves, at least more acceptable to me. And that means I'm able to have much deeper connections than I was able to before. And we have much less conflict. There's much less opportunity for tension. And when there is, I'm able to be more empathetic and understanding of the other person because I'm not trying to get them to be different. That is some of the ways in which acceptance has impacted my relationships. Now, I'm going to talk about acceptance of my circumstances. Though I have become much more forgiving and accepting of my circumstances, this is the area where I have more difficulty. I mean, it's way better than it was for most of my life. It may take me hours or sometimes days or weeks to realize I'm fighting against what is in terms of circumstances, but I'm getting way better than I used to be in resisting circumstances. The example that pops in my mind is about being on the board of my condo association. I've owned my condo for 16 years, and I have been asked to be on the condo board many times over the years. And I kept telling them, I'm building my business right now. I don't have time. And I was told, well, it's only 1 hour a month. And I just didn't believe them because I've never served on a committee where all you do is attend the meeting. There's always work to be done outside the committee. So in 2023, the opportunity came up to replace somebody on the board who had stepped down, which meant I wouldn't have to do a full 3-year commitment. I'd just have to finish out the remainder of his term. So I was like, I'll take it because the idea of being on committee for 3 years is completely unappealing to me. I've done it several times and I'm never doing a 3-year commitment again. So I went to my first meeting and I was like, wow, it's really true. I don't have to do anything outside the meeting. Then at the second meeting, they tried to recruit me to become the secretary of the board, which means having to take the meeting notes and email them to the board members after the meeting. At first, I was resistant to the idea because I was told no work outside the meeting. But I do want to pay my dues as a 16-year member of this community. So at the second meeting, I listened to what the former secretary had to say about the work. She took minutes by hand, then typed them up afterwards. So I thought about it. And at the third meeting, I realized if I was going to do it, I could shorten that process by taking notes at the meeting on my computer. So I said, okay, I'll do it. And now that I stopped resisting and gave in and accepted, like, this is the commitment that I've made, I spend maybe 10 minutes outside of the meeting monthly on this role. And I take minutes during the meeting, which I'm at anyway. So it's a pretty easy task for me. And I can see that I've already made a contribution because I improved the way that their minutes are recorded and I organized them, blah, blah, blah. So here's where my real resistance came up. I thought my term on the board ended this past October, and it turns out it ends next October. I was really looking forward to getting off the board after only about 14 or 15 months, but it turns out I was mistaken, and it's going to be more like 2 years. But you know what? Instead of being pissed off about it, I just accept this is what's happening. This is what I committed to, and I've stopped fighting against it. And it's way better than a 3-year sentence. Commitment. This may seem like a very mundane example, but life is primarily made up of the mundane. If you multiply this type of experience by the 10,000 things that I used to resist against, that I didn't even know that I was resisting, you'll understand why I have so much more ease in my life. I'm not annoyed all the time. All the things that used to annoy the crap out of me, like if I knocked over a glass and it broke, I would be disproportionately upset about that kind of thing. Now, when things like that happen, I say something like, oh, goodness. I never said, oh, goodness, before recovery ever. I used to say, fuck, or Jesus Christ, or what the hell, or I can't believe that just happened. That was the kind of response that I had whenever any little thing didn't go my way. And it's just amazing. Like a tiny little thing like knocking over a glass had this huge reaction from me. Now, when I drop something or knock it over, I often say, oh, gravity works. And I make it into this funny kind of thing. Like, this is what happens in a world where there's gravity. Things fall and break. I'm not resisting that gravity works and shit falls over and sometimes breaks. And I am accepting that I'm not a perfect person. Recognizing and accepting that I'm not perfect and not feeling like I have to hide that gives me a lot more acceptance of other people and their foibles as well. All of this means that I have so much less stress in my life, and I've become a lot more resilient. In other words, I'm adaptable because I'm not fighting against what is. I can much more quickly respond to situations that are happening to me, and I can do it with a lot more focus and clarity because I have so much more energy available to me because I'm not putting all kinds of energy into resisting what's happening. And that means I'm able to make better decisions because I'm thinking more clearly and am better at problem solving because I'm embedded in actual reality instead of the fantasy world that I want it to be. Now, I really haven't gotten much into being more accepting of myself. I had no idea how unaccepting I was of myself. I always thought that I liked myself and had high self-esteem, but recovery showed me that I was a lot more self-deprecating than I ever realized. Self-acceptance is one of the most incredible gifts. I truly love myself in a way that I never did before. And this overall acceptance of people, places, and things includes me. So I now accept that I am a flawsome human being. I am both flawed and awesome. My flaws don't define me entirely. I am still awesome. And guess what? So are you. What I've found is that professional women are afraid people won't like them, so they don't say no. Then they become overwhelmed and resentful because they keep giving in to others and take on too much. What they really want is to have balanced relationships where there's give and take without having to have a confrontation. But they think the problem is that if they knew just the right words to say, things would go more smoothly and they'd be able to stick to their boundaries. So they end up letting people walk all over them and then explode when they can't take it anymore. But the real problem is that they don't know what's okay with them and not okay with them because they're so focused on others. That means they don't set limits or ask for help. What they need to do is focus internally to get clear on what matters to them so they know what to say no to and can communicate that clearly with calm confidence. If this sounds like you, we should talk. Go to barbchat.net to sign up for a call with me. If you like this podcast, and I'm guessing you did because you're still listening, you will also love my weekly newsletter, Friday Fragments, which has short essays similar to the podcast. You can check it out at fridayfragments.news. That's fridayfragments.news. If you haven't already subscribed to my podcast on your favorite podcast outlet, please do that. It helps carry the message to more people. I started this podcast because there was so much wisdom in recovery that just wasn't making its way out into the world. So I want as many people as possible to hear it. I'd also love it if you'd leave a 5-star rating or a review, which you can do on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people find it so they can get the benefits that you've gotten from listening. If someone in particular came to mind when you listen to this episode, please share it with them. And my favorite place to hang out on social media is Instagram. I'm at Higher Power Coaching. Please DM me there. I'd love to hear what you got from this episode. I run private and group coaching programs on building healthy boundaries. Whether you need help with boundaries in your personal, professional, or romantic life, I can help. Head on over to barbchat.net where you can get on my calendar for a free 30-minute Better Boundaries consultation. I also do short-term situational coaching to help people make it through specific situations they're going through, such as divorce, empty nesting, preparing for retirement, or any phase where their identity is shifting. Regardless of the type of coaching, my ideal client is someone who is ripe for change. If that's you, I'd love to work with you. My goal with all my work is to help you make lasting changes in your life, like I've made deep, lasting changes in my life. Remember, it's never too late to recover. No one is beyond hope, and healing is possible. Thanks for listening.